Nope. How's it going?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good.
So you were just here in Indy for your show with Everclear and Marcy Playground. Do you want to kind of introduce yourself first and tell us a little bit about your recent visit here?
Sure, yeah. I'm Jimmy Haha from Jimmy's Chicken Shack, and we've been a band for 31 years, and we were on tour with Marcy Playground and Everclear, who I'm good friends with both of those bands. We've been playing with them for years, and I've actually written songs with Art and wrote a song with John. So
Uh,
yeah, it was one of the coolest shows on the whole tour, and everybody was stoked to be there. And I sang a couple songs with Marcy Playground, so that's always fun too. So
yeah, I dug that. That was really neat. You guys always collaborate well anyway. I had asked him when I interviewed, well, Dylan, I asked him if you guys were gonna perform, and um then he told me that you guys were gonna do Sherry Fraser, and I got really excited because when I saw them at a fair or something, and I they didn't play Sherry Fraser. That was like my favorite one, and
yeah.
I thought maybe it was because John had gotten married and maybe the new wife didn't like it or something. You know what I mean? I don't
Oh
know.
no, no, not at all. It's funny because we first couple shows we played, they didn't play it, and then we had a show just with Marcy Playground and us, and they played it. I was like, yes, and I mentioned I was like, why you got to play that every night? It's like one of the best songs, and they had a fill-in bass player come in, Scott from Dishwalla, and uh and he was like, why isn't Sherry on the list? And I was like, exactly. So they started playing it every night, which was awesome. And then actually they started doing America too, which is a song that I've played with my other band. And so it was nice to sing both of those songs with them. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I obviously I really like Marcy Playground. I was like trying very hard to be like not extra because I knew all the songs and I was like having such a good time. And but it was cool because I got to I hadn't seen you guys before. And then also I always enjoy Art. He's such a sweetheart. So that was
Yeah.
pretty cool. So let's talk about you more. Tell me about how Jimmy's Chicken Shack got started and kind of where you got your name and those kind of fun things.
So it was 93 and it started out as an acoustic duo, me and my friend Jim McDonough. And then we pulled in my old drummer for, I was in a band called 10 Times Big in the late 80s to early 90s. And we pulled in the drummer to play congas. His name was Jim Chaney. So there was three of us named Jimmy. And then our old bass player was reading Malcolm X's biography, and he's like, "You guys should call yourselves Jimmy's Chicken Shack." And I was like, oh, that's a silly name, and yeah, people would remember it. And it was a blues joint that Malcolm X used to deal drugs out of before he was Malcolm X. His name was Red back then, but Charlie Parker, sax player, worked in the kitchen. Red Fox, the comedian, worked in the kitchen, and it was just this kind of cultural hub in Harlem. So we thought it would be a just a fun name. And then Che joined the band, and we were off to the races pretty much. I mean, we put it out a record in the first 5 months we were together, and then we put another record out the next year. And I started a record label called Foul Records. We sold a bunch of records on that label, and then we got signed to Elton John's record label in '96. And our first record came out, national record came out in '97. Then we got, I don't know, eaten up by the industry, swallowed and shuffled around, and we ended up on Island Def Jam Records and put our second record out in '99, at least second national record. And then yeah, it's just kind of been, the same ups and downs that every band experienced, in that kind of the last viable wave that you could ride before, the industry just kind of got decimated.
Definitely a entirely different industry than even just then. And I talk about that actually a lot with different people that I interview because, I've interviewed people of all ages and that's like a theme, right? Is like the difference between how it used to be to just to get started in the business and like what it is now.
Yeah.
So that question that I ask everybody, and I'll go ahead and ask you since you led into it, is what do you see for the future of the music business or like some of the changes that are like that we're coming up on?
Yeah, I'm not a great fortune teller. I mean, back when I started, it was, making flyers on copy machines and hand flyering and postering all the clubs that you played, and phone calls, and there was no cell phones, and there was no, honestly, internet was brand new at that point too. So it was a whole different world of kind of really just gigging and creating stuff and playing as much as you could, and creating a buzz locally that kind of made people kind of excel into the next level. Whereas now, I mean, it's all about algorithms and followers and all that. So I mean, there's people who have never played a gig who've signed record deals, and having a record deal back then was a very different than having a record deal now. And so, yeah, I mean, I've never really been too immersed. I understand the business, and my manager, who's been with me for years, has had decades and decades of understanding. I typically have just always steered clear of caring about what the business does, because the music industry is an industry, and I didn't get into it to, you know, to make widgets. I did it because it was just what I was compelled to do. So, I
Yeah.
mean, I guess what I see is more people making music, and hopefully we'll get some good music out of it. I mean, it's leveled a playing field in certain ways. It's also opened up, the ability for other people to get their music out there that maybe couldn't get on that carousel of major labels kind of thing. So,
Hmm.
it's I think the bottom line is people will just keep making music, and there'll always be good music to find and discover. And the music industry will definitely find a way to screw it up.
That's true. Well, and you don't just make music. You're an artist, right? As well. I was looking at some of your pieces online. You're extremely talented.
Oh, thanks. I appreciate it.
So do
Yeah,
you focus on that? How's that?
I always did art when I was a kid. I always that's thought that's what I was going to do, and then I started really getting into playing guitar when I was around 12, and as I went through high school and stuff, I still was it was art and music always. And I think
Mm.
music just took over after I got out of high school. And then, I published an art magazine as well in Annapolis called Upstart Annapolis, and we're coming up on our 10th year anniversary. So I tend to pick, the most difficult things to make a living at. No, I always say I don't want to make a living. I want to live a life. So it's, I've never focused
Yes.
really on making money, and as a result, I haven't made a ton of it, but but I have a lot of fun. And it's like I've made a career playing music. I've made a career selling artwork, and then in 2014, when everybody thought I was insane to start a print publication, I decided to do that too, and it's been going for 10
That's
years. So, yeah.
no, I love that. That's something all the time people, because Nuvo, we've been around for a long time too, more than 30 years now. And we started out as a print publication, and everybody, even the young kids, and everyone got Nuvo, even if you didn't read, because there were these like dirty little coupons in the back that people would use to go to like the clubs and stuff.
Oh, right.
Yeah, because that's people advertised that way back then. It was like the
Sure.
phone book where you could advertise anything you really wanted to.
Yeah.
But we don't print anymore, and that's always something that we're always hearing is like, we want a printed copy of this, and something that we talk about all the time is things that are tangible. So I think that that's really cool that you did that, and
Yeah.
obviously it's working.
Yeah, I wouldn't do like a weekly or a monthly ever. Mine's a quarterly magazine, and it's more like a coffee table book, and it's just locally released. I do 10,000 copies of it, and I put them out within the area where I live, in and around Annapolis. And that's that's what the subject matter is creative people within the area. So I think doing it
Yeah,
on a smaller level, it can be difficult as far as like raising money and advertising and all that stuff, but I think it's a much more doable thing to do on that smaller scale and that local focus that somehow has worked out. So
yeah. Well, and doing the quarterly thing, I think, is almost standard now for anybody that wants to print, like, anything of, like, Cream does quarterlies.
yeah,
So I get those, and everybody, you want the real magazine, so I pay
yeah,
for the real magazine. But I'm always on about that, about we should start printing again, and I've been kind of going into how to lay out things to where once, someone just wanted to print the web page, it would still lay out so they could print it at least.
Right. Yeah. Even if you did this, you could just do an annual physical release, a short run, and maybe that's something, that you could do while still keeping, the
Yeah.
web,
And using the featured stuff maybe, or like just being like, you don't have to, because we churn out content, we have talented writers all over the city kind of, submitting things all the time. But yeah, you're right. That's a cool little thought. I did listen to one of your interviews, and you were kind of talking about how you wanted to get started on Discord Records, and I thought that was really interesting. The
All
whole
right.
story of how that turned out to be for you.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, at the time when we first started the band, we had friends that were on Discord Records and bands that were from Annapolis that would get on that label just because they were, kind of connected to the DC hardcore scene. I mean, Annapolis is about 30 minutes from DC. It's also 30 minutes from Baltimore. So I always called it the Bermuda Triangle of music. But there was such vastly different scenes in all three towns, and we're influenced by all of them. I mean, the go-go music from DC in the 80s that we all were, kids and grew up listening to the hardcore scene. And then Baltimore had the rock scene, but also this really funky, seedy kind of, art school music scene. And Annapolis had its own singer-songwriter kind of a vibe. So, but yeah, when we first put a record together, I was like, man, I want to be cool to be if we could get on Discord. And I was reading an article, and Ian Mackay was saying, if I'm not your friend, don't send me your record, because I'm not going to put your record out on Discord. I put out records I like, and they're friends of mine. He's like, start your own label. So I instantly was like, all right, I'll start a label. And that's when I came up with Foul Records, and I designed a logo that looked like took the word foul and made it look like a chicken head. And so just kind of played on the pun, and, put out our first tape that way, put our second tape, and then our first CD was both those tapes together. But as we were going, other local bands are like, hey, I want to be on Foul Records. And I was like, fair enough. And, we our first contract was with a friend's band, and basically the escape clause was that if you said I divorce thee, I divorce thee, I divorce thee, the terms of the contract were null and void. And the terms of the contract were that basically you make your record, and then we have a 50-50 split, of everything that we distribute. And so it was a really fair, simple deal. And we did it with a bunch of bands. We put stuff out nationally for a lot of bands that were around the area. And, went for 10 years. And then I decided, instead of handing out free arrows to all of my friends and tattooing a bullseye in my head, I would just put out my own music on it. So, and
Fair.
our newest Jimmy's Chicken Shack record, which came out a couple years ago, called Seconds, came out on Foul Records as well. So
Okay. See, that's awesome. Sometimes I think rejection can lead to something better, almost always, even. So,
yeah, anything that inspires you to do it yourself. I mean, there's nothing more rewarding than just kind of, you know, hoeing your own row kind of a thing, and clearing your own path, and creating your own path, because you're really not subject to anybody else's whims. You're subject to your resources and your abilities, and how clever you are to kind of make it work. And then sometimes when that starts to work out, people want to jump on board and make the path bigger, and it just, it allows more people to kind of go on it. So
yeah. Well, and you've kind of, you've collaborated with a lot of people too. You've obviously already talked about some with Dylan and Art. Um, and didn't you also work with like Aaron Lewis, I
yeah,
think?
so we did a record when we finally were off of when we got out of our major label deal. We did a record with Koch Records, and about five of the songs were co-writes. So I did one with John from Marcy Playground. I did one with Art from Everclear. I did one with Butch Walker, Marvelous Three. I did one with Mark Tremonti, who at the time when we were writing the song, actually I was in his house when he came back and was like, I'm done with this. I can't do this band anymore. And I was like, you might want to stick around. And, for every kid you want to have, you might want to make another Creed record as an insurance policy. And then the next day he came home and he's like, I quit. So it was interesting. It was between kind of Creed and Alter Bridge. And he had played me some stuff and mentioned that Miles, he wanted Miles to kind of work with him on some stuff. And then the last co-write oh yeah, then I did a song with Aaron Lewis. So it was kind of people that I mean, we played with over the years, became friends with, had just had a certain relationship where it was like, yeah, I think we could, come up with a cool tune. And so it was a lot of fun doing, and I think it's a neat record as a result of that.
Yeah, I think it's always cool too to see when you look, like even doing art myself or writing something, when I come together with one of my other friends that is an artist. I think one, if you're already friends, there's something like beautiful to that because you kind of already understand each other and like what the style of the other person is and what they would like. But
Yeah.
two, just the two like creative like minds, kind of meeting and exploding together. That's really. Do you have like
Yeah.
a favorite memory of a collab time or something that you?
I mean, they were all so different, and collaboration is it's just fun. I think I tend to sometimes like collaborations more than stuff I've done on my own, but I guess
Yeah,
maybe the most fun, the record's called Represent, and I think it was really fun was, we had played with Marvelous 3, but I didn't really know Butch well, but some people at the label were like, "Oh, you should write with Butch. He's a brilliant writer," and which he absolutely is. So he came up and hung out. He came and saw my other band play a gig, and he just stayed at my house for a couple days. And I'd had this riff on this idea, and it's kind of how all of the songs started. Was I had like a half of a song or a majority of a song done, and was like, "Hey, help me finish this." So anyway, I had this rough idea and a couple lines, and the song ended up becoming named "Get Over It," but "Get Over It" being spelled like ghetto, and it was just about like white boys trying to be, street, and just the suburban white boys trying to be black, basically. And so it was so much fun writing that song with him because we're just coming up with just the stupidest lines and just laughing our faces off. And it was a really fun process to with someone who I wasn't too familiar with, but who had the same kind of sense of humor and
yeah,
and love for like the unknown. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun.
that's awesome. I dig the last little part of the love for the unknown, and I guess that'll make me ask you this other question that I wrote because I was like, maybe it's dumb. But I was listening to you in another interview, and you were like, you were telling a story, and I'm always paying attention to other things because I have ADHD. And you were like, um, two is my lucky number. And then you went into telling this other story. But then I was like, are you into numerology, like in astrology? Is that something that you, kind of play into when you make albums? Do you ever think about like the number of songs, or is that
Um,
just a random thing that you're just two is your lucky number?
I
This Christmas season, you can make your own magic when you join us at the Strand Theater for these Christmas classics. Elf, showing 11:29 and 12:13. A Christmas Story, showing 12:13. A sing-along Christmas, barbershop style, showing 12:15. Only at the Strand Theater, located at 215 South Harrison Street in Shelbyville, Indiana. The Strand, where we make movies magic.
Number.
I would say I'm not too into it, but I understand, what it is. So like there's a book called The Birthday Book. I don't know if you've ever heard the Birthday Book,
Okay,
but
no, I haven't.
it's pretty cool. And it's supposed to kind of be like tell you about yourself or whatever. So I looked up December 2nd, which is my birthday. And it was funny because I've always just been hyper focused on two, and because it was my birthday. And I think two is a really interesting number. I mean, it's it's a good number. So um the first sentence on the page, and I went and read other people that I knew, and it kind of was like, oh yeah, I can see how this works. And that's how astrology works in a way. It's so broad that you could always relate, but there's a lot of things that really do work and I think make sense. So the first sentence on my page, and there was no other sentence like this on any other page in the book. It said, "You are ruled by the number 2." And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And it's true. So, I mean, our newest record is called Seconds, which is spelled with a 2 as the S. And, there's a kind of not just a double, it's more like a triple entendre to the title. But yeah, I've always been into that. The number 23 is another very powerful number in numerology, and was always enamored with kind of the thoughts behind that. And so, yeah, I mean, music is math, and the world is math, and the internet is math. And I'm not a
Yeah.
math guy, but I think obviously numbers, yeah, they're important.
Yeah. No, I totally am into things like that too. And it was just something that I caught because I was like, I wonder if that's like something. And I like to ask questions that I feel like other people didn't already ask. And everybody asks the same, what's your favorite song and what's your favorite song to perform? And I mean, if someone's already your fan, they likely know most of that anyway, so it's kind of
Right.
like, I want to talk about something different.
Yeah, I mean, and you think about math and art and like and life, and it's like the Fibonacci spiral. It's like that repeating spiral that occurs naturally, the shape of the Nautilus, the shape of a hurricane. It's like that's cool stuff. And it's not only, artistically wonderful, it's mathematically wonderful. And people think that math can't be necessarily creative or artistic because it's so finite and it's so definite, but there is some kind of artistic beauty to it. So I always find that, when the dichotomy that happens in that way is kind of cool. So
I think it's cool too when you can be, creative and artistic and also into things like math and science. It makes you, more well-rounded. And anyone that does like art, especially drawing and painting, you're still doing math. Like even if it's not this, you're laying out a face on there, and that's still math. It's symmetry, and you're still gridding things. And people are just so well, math is, we're not going to use it. They just don't understand, I guess, that everything is really, like you said, it's math.
well, and everything is a process. So even just putting together a painting, even if it's not necessarily, you don't feel like it's heavily, you know, laden with math undertones, it's still a process that ends up happening, that occurs, that you focus on.
Hey.
Oh, hey, you focus on kind of the each step, and that's kind of why, and math, or any experimentation, it's a process of steps. And really creating art is the same thing. It's a process of steps in a way. So yeah, it's fun.
For sure. But that stuff's pretty cool. What is something, if the record industry, or if the, whole music industry just died tomorrow, or if everything stops, existing, what would you want people to remember most about you, or was something that you would want people to think of when they think of you?
I would hope that we would just, I think one thing that we've always escaped is being pigeonholed. I mean, that necessarily hasn't been a great thing in the music industry, because the music industry likes things to be perfectly wrapped and with the same bow, so they know that, okay, this next song, when you hear it, you know that it's from this band, and then the next record that comes out, and the records for the rest of their lives will all sound the same, so it can be marketed well. And those bands tended to do the better, that had that consistency. And I would hope that people would just remember that we were never consistent. That, like, that every record and every song sounds different, and that there's it goes a little bit all over the place, kind of like everyone's personal taste would go all over the place. It's like, I've never liked one kind of music. I like, my favorite bands, I always say they're B, they start with B, which is the second letter. Um, so Beach Boys, the Beatles, Black Sabbath, Bob Marley, and Bad Brains. And so feel like all those things kind of encompass our band, because, we've got fun, poppy, quirky stuff, and we've got hard stuff, and we've got, a little bit of skank, and, so it's kind of a mix of all those things. And yeah, if anybody remembered us, I would be like, hopefully they'd remember that we sounded original and inconsistent.
I think there's beauty in some level of inconsistency in art and music, but not in personality.
Right.
Like, put your inconsistencies into your creative outlets and not into your personal relationships. But yeah,
Exactly.
is that the Do Right is kind of was obviously inspired by a not so ideal relationship, or was that more about the one that you had with the record industry, or how was that?
Well, it was probably 3 in the morning, and I was watching a live Green Day concert popped on somewhere. I don't know where. It's probably MTV. And I was like, and I just wasn't necessarily a Green Day fan. I mean, I can appreciate some of the songs, and we played with those guys, and they're solid band and everything. But at the time, this was before I had any of that, and I was just like, this is just it's not punk rock. It's just pop music. It's just silly pop music with a little bit of distortion. And I was like, I could write a song like that. And so I just started writing a song, but thinking about my girlfriend at the time, who was definitely um was beautiful, beautiful, and absolutely out of her mind. And so it was good, fuel for the fire. And so I kind of wrote this song real quick, and didn't sound anything like Green Day, and but it had this kind of that pop quality, or with a little edge to it. It's pop punk,
Sure.
whatever you call it. But it always sounded like, oh, it sounds like I've heard this before, or that's an old song that is done new. And it was
Mm-hmm.
the original guys in the band never wanted to play that song. They thought it was silly, and I was like, it is silly, and that's why I
That's the
want to play
point.
it. And had we put it out when I wrote it, it probably would have, like, we kind of were backwards the way our records went. And when High was our first single, it was too hard for the radio during the day, so it took a while for that to hit. And then when Do Right came out on our second record 7 years after I wrote it, it was back, the radio had turned to the more hard stuff like High. So it's interesting. But we had top 10 singles in two different genres. One was active rock, and then one was alternative, which was kind of cool to have two formats, and straddle those with two different songs. So definitely, proves our inconsistency. And yeah, when the song was finally recorded, that was the reason. There was a bunch of labels closing at the time, and they dropped hundreds of bands. And Island Def Jam basically dropped Elton John's record label that we were on. They dropped Elton John as an artist. They dropped hundreds of artists, but because of the song Do Right, they heard it, listened to it in a meeting, and they were like, all right, we'll keep this band. And we were like one of maybe 10 bands that they kept out of hundreds. So, it ended up kind of keeping us going too. So
So
it's,
you did something right.
yes, exactly. Touche.
Hey. No, but that's awesome though, because those are those moments where it's just like that's not what I saw for the world, or like what I envisioned for, it's weird the way that people sometimes come to be known for one thing when that, like, they're not punk rock.
Right,
I
right.
like Green Day. They're not. I like their older albums, like were
I mean, it's a great record. There's great songwriting. It's, but I guess what turned me off was, I am one of those melodrama. It's when anybody tries to fake an accent, and it's like faking an English punk rock accent. It was just like, stop. Just
yeah. It was.
so it just turned me off. But again, what do I know? They've sold probably 20 million records of that record. So,
Sure.
I mean, and not that record sales, dictate something being good, but it always struck me as odd. So I wanted to make fun of it in a way. And that's kind of the inspiration that started that song, which is kind of funny.
Well, and a lot of the audience, and I think the kind of funny thing about that, like Kurt Cobain, talked about it in his music, and people still sang along and had no idea. But like a lot of the time, people have no idea, one, who you are or what the song's actually about, and if it's just catchy, they'll still sing along.
Of course.
Like
Yes.
Third Eye Blind had that song that was about sex, and they slid that in there.
Do,
And
do,
people were
do,
like, dude,
do,
dude,
do,
dude. Yeah.
do, do. Another great that's a great record. I wore that record out.
Solid,
It goes
solid
all over
record.
the place. There's great pop stuff, great writing. That
Really.
a really, really cool record.
Yeah. I think I saw too, about what, because I was thinking about Green Day a second ago. Didn't they just announce something about they were going to release tapes for like a Teddy Ruxpin or something? Like,
Oh, I don't know. I really don't keep up with the music industry or bands or anything. I really have
well,
no.
I just thought that was funny because there's a band, Belushi Speedball, that did that like forever ago. So,
Oh, I
and
did read something where those guys just said those guys ripped off our idea.
yeah,
And
that
an
was, yeah.
article. And I don't know if they're trying to sue them or not, which would be really comical because why? But I mean, it's like you can't copyright an
No,
idea
I don't think I,
approach, But I think that they were like, yeah, these guys ripped off the idea from us, and I thought that was pretty funny. It's like, well, I mean, my favorite band is Steely Dan, and my favorite lyric by them
oh,
is
nice.
"Be glad that you can use what you borrow." So
Steely Dan, that's solid. Yeah, I have my dad's Steely Dan record, so
it's some dad music, but I've
yeah,
loved it since I was in high school. So yeah,
I love dad music. I'm
yeah,
I'm
oh, yeah.
stuck because I like might get to interview Tommy James from Tommy
Ah,
James and the Shondells, and I'm like, and I was telling some of my friends, and they're like, "Who's that?" And I was,
who? Right.
you don't know. And so many songs have been redone of theirs, and
Oh yeah, that's
yeah,
cool.
crazy. But yeah, I think if there's anything else that you want to tell anybody, or you good?
Well, I would say go to Bandcamp and you could check out Jimmy's Chicken Shack Seconds, or you could check out my solo project is under the name Mend the Hollow, or um, come to a show. Follow
When will
us.
you guys be close to Indy again?
I'm not quite sure. Follow us on social media. We have Instagram and Facebook, but yeah, hopefully hopefully we'll do some stuff with Everclear next year, but we definitely been talking with Marcy Playground about doing some stuff, maybe doing some short runs. So who knows? We're trying to look and see what's happening for the spring for us. I mean, we've got some things happening in the winter. We're working on finishing. We put a live version of our first major label record out this past year. We're doing so that was the one with High on it. It's called Pushing the Salmonella Envelope. So we did that live version of that. We're doing a live version of Bring Your Own Stereo, the one with Do Right, and we're finalizing that. So we'll get that out this winter, and yeah, hopefully get out back on tour in the spring and summer. So
Nice. Well, hopefully we'll get to see you come close to here. If
yeah.
someone wanted to check out your art, because I was online checking that out, and it's for purchase online.
Some of it, yeah, I haven't updated my site in a long time. But the website is Jimmy Haha, which is Jimi, like Jimi Hendrix, jimmyhaha.com. And there's a bunch of my paintings on there. I mean, I'm on my social media, I'll post them up when I do it and post up paintings and stuff. So um
Nice.
and I basically paint commissions at this point. I don't have a lot of paintings laying around that haven't been sold. It's just, people email me and be like, "Hey, I want to pick you to paint a picture of my dog or my kid or whatever, So, or what do you have, that's around?" So, it's yeah, if people want art commissions, they can, find me on social media.
Hell yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you
Awesome.
so much for taking the time to talk to me. Yeah.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad I ran into you at the show, and yeah, glad we got to
Yeah,
do this.
for sure. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Take care.
You too. Bye.